Welcome to the Modern Pet Retailer, where pet retailers come together to solve problems in their pet businesses. This week, we're talking all things hiring. We've transitioned from our inventory discussion that we've had. So if you want to see some of that content, I will link it in the school classroom, or if you're on YouTube, in the comments below, and you can rewatch any of those that you need. But today we're going to be talking about hiring. We're talking about how to keep crazy basically out of your building. I don't know if it's just the pet industry, but it seems like more and more these days you get some very interesting applicants inside your business. And that could be for a plethora of reasons, could be bad marketing to the wrong applicants or the demographic in your area. But we want to talk today about how we can basically gatekeep our business so that we only accept good quality candidates into our roles so that our business can flow and operate efficiently. So if you've ever hired an urgency because somebody quit last minute, or you have an employee out for a long period of time sick and you need to cover that space, this conversation is going to be for you because we don't want to make rash decisions based off of fires, essentially. So before we talk about who we should hire, we got to talk about who we are as a company, because we don't want to attract the wrong people if we don't know who we are. I mean, we want like-minded people. So Braxton's has had a couple renditions of core values throughout the years, just as things have changed within the industry, community, and then what you need to expect out of employees.
So Braxton's is 88 years old, and I don't know that we've had written core values for most of it. So you could look at it as aspirational versus observed. So the best way I believe to look at your core values is observe how you're acting, and that will show you what your core values are. But where TIFF is heading is really looking at articulating those on paper so that you can share them with everybody, your employees, the community, and really understand how your decisions are made. So even though it might have been around for a while, it doesn't matter if you started yesterday or if you've been around for 50 years, we have to think about what our operating principles are, and that lives within our core values.
Yeah, and all of our interview questions are based around the core values for us, and specifically, and I think a lot of retailers in the pet industry, is the only way we compete with big retailers are customer service and serving our customer the best way possible. So that is 3 of our interview questions are centered around that core value. And we wouldn't know that if we hadn't laid that out. You could say, oh, we have good customer service here. But if you don't articulate that in your core values and then also lay it out on paper of what that actually looks like, it's hard to ask the right questions in an interview to find those people that kind of sync with that. So before you write any job posting, you want to have the core values laid out, 8 to 10 things that are important to you as a business. So that can give you the grounds for building the marketing around how to find the applicants, building the interview questions, and then being able to articulate them in the interview so that the first time the applicant doesn't hear it is 6 months after working for you. They're like, oh, I didn't realize we were customer service focused. So it'd be like a surprise for them. So we don't want that to happen. Let's go over a couple other ones we have just to give you kind of example of what our core values are here and what some of yours could be. And it's going to change from business to business.
And also core values, just like when you're coaching an employee that might be having an issue, you want to stay away from vague language and move toward concrete behavior language. And because no one really knows what being nice means. No one really knows what customer service means. No one knows what be happy, right? These things are not well defined. So you have to define them in a behavioral term. So it's okay if the single word of a core value is stated like integrity, but then within the description of the core value, you have to define it so that it's articulated very clearly. What does that mean to you and your business and how we behave on a day-to-day basis? It's really important to get down to that behavioral aspect so it can be measured. If it's very vague, you really can't measure it. And 10 people will think 10 different things about what it means. So once you get down to behavior, it becomes very clear what you mean by the core value.
Yeah, so I'll use that one as an example. So one of our core values is basically integrity and honesty, even when it's hard. So we define it, honesty builds trust with our customers, our teammates, and ourselves. We speak the truth with courage and kindness. So if a customer comes in asking for an honest opinion about a product, we don't want to just say, it's a really good product. You want to give them the parameters of if you have a good shoer, it might not be a good fit, or those kind of nuanced things that define a product. You want to be honest. You don't want to just make the sale, and you're building that relationship with your customers. And you want to be able to articulate that to a new applicant so that they're not going after the wrong goal. They're not going after, I just need to sell as many toys. They need to be honest so that we don't get these toys returned. Also, when you're working with teammates, especially in a younger crowd, like you just have to be honest when you've messed up on things. It can be very difficult, but it's easier to correct if you stay on top of errors and everything instead of not letting somebody know that you messed up something. And then you basically find it 6 months later and it's like a bigger problem than it was previously, or it could have been fixed and not even that big of a deal. So being honest with your teammates, and those reflect in some of the questions we ask as well. It's like, when's the last time you've had a problem where you messed up and you had to fix it in the interview process? So admitting to mistakes, owning tough conversations, and doing what's right even when it's uncomfortable is a big thing too. So those are like just defining that integrity basically and what it means to us. Another favorite one of ours is, since we do have a younger demographic, is mainly of our employees, is negatives go up and positives go around. Being around for so long, gossip has been a problem in and outside of this business. So we have a core value of basically, if you have a concern, a problem, you take that up. You don't take that parallel. You don't take it to another team member. You take it to the next stage in leadership. So team lead, system manager, general manager, whatever, owner eventually. But talking negatively about another employee in a personal way or a professional way is absolutely not accepted. So we ask questions in the interview if these kinds of scenarios have happened in the past for them and how did they handle it, basically. Because I have a zero tolerance for cattiness or bringing people down too, because we're all just trying to get better, especially since we are technically like an entry level job at most of our roles. We're all just trying to get better. And if that team member doesn't know that they might be falling behind in some ways because somebody just wants to complain about it instead of actually solve the problem, the only person that's getting hurt is the person that's not had the potential to grow and do that. So we have very clear rule around that, and then a core value. And basically we ask people to ask themselves, am I bringing this problem to someone that can actually solve it for me? If the person I'm talking to cannot help me, it's gossip, essentially.
Yeah, I really like that one because it fixes problems and solves problems before they occur. And like you said, the gossip can just engender this sort of weird clickiness where somebody's isolated out of the group and everybody else is gossiping about them, or you're gossiping about a customer who probably is not present, but other customers can overhear that. It's very damaging and cause lots of problems. And the other side of that is the negatives go up, is really considering what you just said about the interview question is, where had you experienced this before? But how do we take that negativity and only give it to people who have the capacity to solve that problem? Then those problems get solved. So it is a very positive for us value in the business that helps to reduce potential growth of problems, but also eliminate problems because they come to light. Our employees feel comfortable approaching a team lead or yourself as manager so that we can just discover what's going on and then solve the problem. Then everything gets easier and better more quickly than it's like the other issue of, you find out 6 months later because there's an inventory issue and the problem just gets bigger. So I do really like that value. It's very powerful.
Yeah, I'll touch on one more because it's another one at the top of our list that I feel like I learned this from you. It's something that you think about in the back of your head your whole life. You want to make things easier for other people, but you definitely drove it home of kind of what this looks like. So one of the other core values we have is creating ease for others. And when we define it, we look for ways to reduce friction in other people's lives. So that's not just for customers and making sure they're serviced correctly, but that's our coworkers and then the other businesses that we operate and associate with. It's things that I don't think people are always concerned about what's inside your own house, but it also affects other businesses, how you treat them. And basically, are you making their lives easier? One scenario that comes up frequently is we deal with a third party company that services our towels for our self-service dog wash. And we basically get them everything ready for them. But if the employee inside of Braxton's doesn't take their time to put the towels in the right place, make them in convenient spots, it could be very difficult on the third party company to pull those towels out and get them into their truck. So we have rules and stuff like that around making that easier for our partners because we want to be good customers ourselves. but we also want to raise people that are thinking about other people's needs and not just what makes my job easier right now. If I just toss these towels in this bag and it's too heavy for somebody, I'm not picking it up again, but somebody's picking it up down the road. So it's going to be too heavy for them. Bags tear, physically strenuous, all those things. So just people that are conscious about making other people's lives easier other than themselves. So always asking yourself, is what I'm doing helping someone else accomplish their task more easily, or am I unintentionally making their job harder? Is a way we define this one.
Yeah, that is another one I like a lot too. And I often look at our any given experience that we're having. If there's issues, the issue is rarely just the one in front of us. It happened 2 or 3 steps ago. And if we can solve those problems, everything gets easier. We want to look at it within our business operations for customers and other, you could call them stakeholders, our vendors that we deal with. The example that you gave with Cintas, our tel vendor, is what has to happen in the interaction between us and them. And we design our vendor communications, our week to week distributors, through what is best for them. Who has to get the information? How do they have to receive it? Because it does 2 things. One, it literally makes their job easier, but it also makes our own job easier, because if we say we have a return issue, we receive something and they sent the wrong product, or maybe we received a damage. We know that each distributor wants a variety of different pieces of information, maybe photographs, maybe UPC, maybe lot code. They certainly want a description. But what we discovered is if we can communicate that information. So whether or not the distributor wants a picture of the UPC, it's easy enough for us to send the picture of the UPC to every vendor, right? And now we don't have a back and forth communication issue. We give them everything they want and maybe a little bit more. Their problem solved. They're really happy with it. All they have to do is approve or deny. But because we're giving them so much information, we rarely get kickback denials. Our returns just go through smoothly, very quickly. And it's because we're designing our systems around, can we anticipate or even interact and ask, what is it that we're doing that we can do better for you, for our vendors, for our customers, for all the service providers that we deal with? And I think to Tiff's point about employees, not only do we want to look for this as a personality trait in an interview, we want to cultivate it in-house, because it just, it means our employees are more engaged at all levels. And this just creates a scenario that's going to drive way better customer service, because if they can do it for our vendors and for their coworkers, we know that's part of their behavior that they're going to apply to the customers, anticipating needs, being helpful, doing as much as we can to really make things easier for other people.
Yeah, definitely. So now that we know who we want to emulate, what kind of human beings we're looking for, we have to learn how to target them and find them where they are. Because sometimes they're not walking through your door. You have to find them where they're at and know how to target them. So you want to create the same way you have a customer avatar, you want to create an employee avatar so that you can narrow down where those people live, where they might be socializing, if it's social media marketing or anything like that. Most retailers just post like a generic help wanted sign, and you basically get generic candidates. You get people that don't know what you're looking for. So you want to be as specific as possible. And that comes down to the who you're looking for as well. So we have 3 employee avatars here at Braxton's, and some of our employees check some of these boxes. Some of them are outside that box. This doesn't have to be super cookie cutter. It just helps us understand who the best fit is, and what demographic they're in, so that I know where I need to look when I'm looking for someone. And when I say where I need to look, I'm talking about like social media platforms they might be on, or they might be college job boards, or even just as specifically like the help wanted sign. We are very specific on what we put on that help wanted sign. So it's the hours, it's the job description, it's what we're looking for, in different details, just so that people know before they even apply if they're a good fit. They need to be like, yeah, that's kind of me. Yeah, it's resonating basically. So one of the avatars we have is what we call the retiree.
But I think maybe if we just pull that back just a tiny little bit, an avatar is basically narrowing the scope to one idea who represents a larger group. An avatar is maybe one person that you talk to when you're talking to all of your customers. Maybe you're designing an avatar around your best customers. They have certain demographics, like psychographic. They live within a certain range of your store. They're married, they own a house, whatever it is. We compile, um, we take the best traits of the most common traits of our best customers when we're looking for them, and we compile it into one person. And it's really cool if you can even name it. Oh, this is Jennifer Smith. She lives in a 4-bedroom home within 7 miles of our store, and she's married and they have 3 kids. When you do that, you can actually imagine having a conversation with that person. You're more likely to really speak deeply to that person. So when Tip talks about avatar and the definitions of the avatars that we're looking at, this is really what we've gone through is we have looked at who we want to attract very specifically and built a persona, an avatar around those traits so that we can communicate very clearly to the people that we want to attract. And one more note about how to build an avatar is just like with core values, they're like aspirational and there's observed. So aspirational is not sometimes stray into unrealistic. We want an employee who has all free available time and, going to be super happy with a wage that's really comfortable for us. And we can start to do these things that might not be as realistic. It's the poster child of our employee pursuit. But what can work really well is if we look at our own employees that exist today and we say, of our best employees, maybe you can find 2 or 3 of your best employees, and you say, what are the observed traits that we really love about these employees? And then you start to build the avatar around who you are certain that you want to replicate. What is their age range? What is their education level? What is their home ownership experience? Do they have a car? Do they not have a car? Do they own their own pets? So there's a variety of things you can begin to discover just by using an observed pathway to build this avatar. And Tip will define the more specifics about our ideal avatars, who we want to employ. I just wanted to give you a background about how these avatars were developed so that you can develop your own more easily.
Thank you. Yeah. So like I said, with 3 different avatars that we have built here. One is called the retiree. This is somebody that's just decided they're no longer going to be in the workforce for whatever reason in a professional capacity, and they want to stay engaged in their community, usually have a lot of service skills or at least some life experiences that kind of brings a comfortability around customers and everything. They usually have loyalty and retention, long retention, but they're not here for a career. They're here to just engage the community and stay active, basically. The second one is a re-entering parent is what we call that one. So this could be somebody that's maybe stayed home for the last 6 or 7 years with their children, and now the children are in public school and don't need as much at home attention. And maybe they don't want to enter the professional workforce. And then they just want something that's easy and accommodating to when they need to pick the kids up at school and just flexible, which is something that we are very good at. I'd like to say here, looking for like a welcoming environment and also just staying active and social with people. And then finally, we have the gap year student. And of course, we take college students. We have a couple on our staff right now that are still in study and doing college at their speed, but that are locally. With the gap year students, it's like they're hungry to learn different skills because they want to better themselves because either they're going to go back to school or maybe they're not and they're going to do something else. But they're usually like, these are my favorites because they're very moldable. Like they were willing to go to college, so they're willing to take on a little bit of extra education and they want to learn things, but maybe for either financial reasons or they just need some direction. So I find these candidates very moldable, and usually they're a little bit farther along. They might have their own pets, which is beneficial because I find any candidate we have that does care for their own pet retains the nutrition information a lot easier just because they have more emotional stake in it. We also see like a higher retention in this candidate or this kind of grouping here as well.
Just a comment on retention, which you mentioned multiple times, is we highly value retention because our store is education based and it takes such a long time for our employees to ramp up knowledge that we feel like it's massive customer service benefit when our employees stick around, when they learn more and more, then they can recommend products. They just have a better knowledge base all around. Customers become more comfortable with them. Now, so retention is from a perspective really important because training is very expensive, but also from a familiarity and comfort level with engagement with customers, both on the employee side being comfortable conversing with customers, but customers being comfortable with their favorite employee because they've seen him here for 9 months, 1 year, 5 years. Retention is super important to us.
Yeah. And once you understand who your avatars are, it becomes easier to understand what their motives might be so that you can, again, change the copy and the languaging in your ads or in your help wanted information to, again, let them think internally when they're reading it. They're like, yes, this is me. I'm looking to build these skills. Yes, I'm looking to engage my community. So they can start checking the boxes and basically ruling themselves out, hopefully on the pre side for you. So you don't have to rule a bunch of people out in an interview process. So after we know who we want to target, we know what values they have, we know what their motivations or can anticipate what their motivations might be. We can start crafting the job postings themselves. Because if I've learned anything over the last 5 years, it's like generic postings, help wanted, it just attracts anybody really. So it's, I need work, yes. But are you interested in animals at all? Are you interested in even engaging a community? The main job we hire for here is retail customer service staff. And I've had applicants come through and they're like, I really don't want to talk to anybody. And they're like, I don't think this is going to work for you. Like, or that you have I really just want to hang out with animals all day, which you will definitely get that experience, but that's not the priority and usually doesn't go along with different communication styles with animals and humans for sure. So we have to be able to communicate with humans and not just be want to play with dogs, want to play with cats all day long. So definitely important to be very specific of who you're looking for in the job description.
Yeah, I joke around that it's very dangerous when a prospect comes in and says, I really love animals. Usually that means I'm not really comfortable with humans, but because humans carry the wallet and make the decisions, our staff really has to be comfortable interacting with humans and be very, really connected with pets as well, but absolutely have to deal with humans.
I think our customers would argue their pets carry the wallets, but that might just be our customers. But yeah, so with the job description, if you're posting it on a company like Indeed or blanking, ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn, any of those types of things, you want to first introduce your company and you want to introduce it through those core values because that's the way you want to weed them out. And they don't care if you've been in business for 88 years. They don't care how much revenue you did or what other possible things you could think of. All they care about is, does my value align with this company? Am I going to be a good culture fit here? So that's what we want to start out with when we say Braxton's Animal Works is about X, Y, and Z. We want it to be those targeted core values so that, again, they can read it and check off in their head, yes, I fit this description, basically. We don't want pulse. We don't want breathing, whatever the military standards are sometimes, but I could say that because I was in the military. It's fine. We want to list out the type of person that thrives here because success, it's different for each independent pet retailer. You can look at two different, like a Pet Supplies Plus and a Braxton's Animal Works retail person, and success looks different in those two landscapes. If they do upselling, you have to be comfortable doing that kind of thing. If it's not important to us, we wouldn't put that in there kind of stuff. So it's might be the same role in two different businesses, but it could be a completely different painted role. So you have to articulate what success looks like. Any specific qualities you're looking for that might tie back to the avatars would be important. I don't imagine too many people having like an education requirement, but if you do, or if you're like in the grooming space and you need X, Y, Z of experience before you can work at your place, those will be all very important. And setting honest expectations. I think I had read a study that was like people will not apply to roles unless they know what the anticipated salary or hourly is now. They just want that transparency up front. And they don't want to find out in the first or second interview that it's only a $15 an hour job or whatever it is. Just setting yourself up for success and just giving as much information as you can, accurately as you can. Because if your retail position's between, I'm going to say $10 and $15, we're in PA, just to clarify where that is, because I've just found out that we're pretty low on the minimum wage standard, but being upfront about it, because some people once might not apply because they assume you might be lower than what you are. And then some might apply because they need more than what you can offer, which you don't want those applicants anyways. They're not going to be happy, even if you need a pulse in your behind your register. They're not going to be happy because they're not going to be financially stable employees. So you don't want to even mislead them in that way anyways. Hours, physical demand. Sorry, you want to jump in, Dave?
I was going to say, from compensation standpoint, retail does, and like you said, in Pennsylvania, we have a little bit lower than some other states around. And we can either articulate in the ad or very quickly once they come in is there are significant other benefits, employee feeding programs, if possible, depending on the brand, and or employee discounts that are very valuable. We have some employees that probably make more in their discount than they do in their salary. So compensation, you can articulate if you have a clear compensation plan of the benefits, even the soft benefits, like Tiff mentioned, parent work coming back in the workforce. Flexibility is a value add. You can define it, but you don't want a parent who's going to disappear once a week because their child has a runny nose. But flexibility could look like, yeah, we can arrange our scheduling around your child pickup if that's possible. You may or may not have that flexibility, but you can articulate those things up front because they are value adds beyond just the paycheck. And I think it's important to understand the broader compensation package so that your employees can decide if it's worthwhile for them. And Tiff keeps circling around and has mentioned, we want to be so clear that we are turning off the people that ultimately will not last very long, even if they thought they wanted the job. They will be unsatisfied. They will not be happy with the compensation. They will not like the hours that you're doing. They don't want to lift a 50-pound bag if you have them. So being super clear up front, like Tiff is saying, very important.
Yeah, and I have not had any success when it comes to any of the job posting websites, but knowing where your people are at, if you're in a college heavy town and there's a college board, knowing that you can post on there, that you have jobs wanted, depending after you decide who your avatar is, where that person is. Because I mentioned Indeed, ZipRecruiter. Personally, I've never gotten anything other than just kind of people looking for jobs, a job for those. But the best quality people, I think we've gotten a couple referrals. We've gotten a college board hire that was pretty good, and social media basically. So the targeting kind of the age range, which I think we used Instagram for that one because Facebook, there's an older demographic on that one. We've gotten good candidates out of that. And it's just, I like the social media aspect because one, they could kind of fact check you on your job postings. Like the one person we hired that found us on Instagram, she seen the posting and she found our intro video that was like, this is who we are. This is we're a fun family owned business and really related to some of the other organic content we had on that. And of course, Instagram being free if you don't want to pay for paid ads, which it's hard to argue with free sometimes, but you can get specific by accident, I feel like, on social media, just because they're going to research you a little bit easier. They don't have to Google Braxton's Animal Works and just find your kind of about page, which they may or may not resonate with because it's going to be very factual based. So they can look over your social media. Hopefully, it's in a good spot to look over. But I know that's one way that we've got a long term employee. And on the referral programs, we don't have any kind of compensation set up. We just ask. But I have heard really good things of people that use referral programs to find employees. So basically, employee A is like your star performer, and they have a either acquaintance or a friend that would be a good fit, and they have to work an X amount of days in order to get the employee A some kind of compensation for having them hired after they go through a process. But I've heard of people doing like mainly in the grooming space because groomers and service-based companies, each person is revenue generating potential to grow your business, whereas retail, it's a little bit more difficult because if you have more bodies, it doesn't necessarily mean more revenue or anything. But one way you could look at it if you are a retail store is if you have your most expensive employee or your whoever your revenue generating person is. So that could be your owner if you're doing all the marketing and bringing people in, or your manager if they're doing similar roles, or they're your most expensive person. If they're covering the floor, you can figure out how much a referral program would cost you if it was the benefit of getting back your star person to help generate more revenue for you.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts on that. If we step back a little bit, referral program's good, but employee ad placement, we talked about 3 avatars, and we want to be smart about who we're trying to attract, in what place we're trying to attract them. So the Instagram is a perfect example of this, where we would be looking for the younger, most likely gap year employee on Instagram. So we should be speaking the language of the gap year employee. What are their needs? What are their needs? What are their wants? What are their interests? How do they want to connect with Braxton's? And if we're going to post in some place where we're looking for retirees, we want to speak the language of the retiree, right? We're going to be talking about connection with the community, having a group to hang out with, and those types of things. And if it's the parent reentering, whatever parent groups you have, we're going to speak about flexibility. So you want to make your essentially what becomes an ad. It's not just a job posting. It's an advertising marketing piece, fits the proper avatar in the proper channel. And then we move forward to tips talking about referrals. And we'll talk a little bit more about how you can perk your current employees. But this is self-selecting, because if you pick your best employee, let's say is a gap year person who, or chose not to go to college, and they're 22, 23 years old, and they really enjoy working for you. They take care of their own pets. There's a lot of things that you see within their personality and their demographic and everything that you like. It's most likely that person will refer someone similar to them. So you're self-selecting just through this referral. It's not like you're maybe a 22-year-old might recommend their parent who's retiring or something. I don't know. But if you want similarity, referral tends to attract similarity. So we don't want all of our employees to refer necessarily, because they're all the best and there's the mediocre, right? So you can maybe have a private conversation with those people that are most likely to refer, and those people that are your best employees, asking them to refer. And this is more likely to give us a good prospect to come in the doors and to test. Sorry, Tiff, I just wanted to wrap that before you really got into the how to measure potential for referral perk for those employees.
Yeah, not everybody wants to work with their mom or dad, though. So I would be shocked if I ever got that referral. But yes. Oh, so yeah, we're talking about like, how could you build a program like a referral program? So let's just speak specifically to retail, and I won't pretend to do any math. Jay, you could jump in on the math. But for if your best, I'll use manager. Your manager does all your marketing, does the majority of the ops for your business. You don't really want them on the floor. You don't want them in a $15 an hour role when they're paid $25 to $30 an hour. So if you had to spend 2 weeks to find a new employee to cover that $15 an hour job, when you have to have your manager on the floor for that amount of time, you can math that out of I could spend $500 and still be better off if I can get a good quality candidate through the door in the interview process and hiring process than having my manager on the floor for a long period of time, because I need them back in the office. I need them doing whatever it is that makes this company function and run and profitable. So you can work that backwards. And then, of course, if you are service-based industry, figuring out how much a groomer can provide in revenue or profit, you can say, I would be willing to pay X amount of dollars to get this much more profit, essentially, for a referral-based program in a service business.
Yeah. And I think we have to understand what we want from our manager. I don't mind a manager being on the floor a little bit of time, because it's interact with the customers, it's interacting with the employees, it's understanding the business from the nuts and bolts perspective. But if it's mandatory because you're short staffed, you are not doing the more important jobs. You're not managing inventory. You're not managing buying. You're not coaching employees. You're doing all the things that you're not doing those things that you're actually being paid to do. And for a little bit of math, if we use Tiff's example of, let's just say $30 an hour on a 2,000 hour year, that's a $60,000 manager. Maybe they work more hours, so it's 25 to 30 hours, whatever, $30 per hour, whatever that looks like. If your front staffers make around 15, that's a $15 differential between your manager's hourly and your front staff hourly. And if you have an 8-hour day, a lot of you guys have 10-hour days, some have probably not less, but supposedly you're really short staffed and the manager has to work the floor 5 days a week. That is a $600 cost to run the manager on the floor for 1 week, because you should be hiring someone who you can pay front staff wages for $15 an hour, and you're not. The manager's working the floor in lieu of all of the other stuff that they should be doing. and it's a very real cost. I don't know that we were going to jump into training, but this is also bad hires cost more because your training cost and your offboarding costs and your morale costs. So if you take it just from a dollars and cents perspective, if you have a new hire and they're getting trained by a good employee, that's also $30 an hour, $15 an hour, $15 an hour to have one employee. So your training is super, super important and very much worth that cost. But training a bad employee who you shouldn't have hired in the first place also carries that cost, but many times over. So each new employee, oh, that person only lasted 2 weeks. Oh, that person only lasted 3 months. New training costs over and over again. So yeah, those are your numbers are different, but you get the idea. $600 a week to have a manager running your front, customer service, clerking is a cost you might think about, but it's can add up very quickly to real dollars.
Yeah, those hard costs definitely, for sure. So, and there's also soft costs to all of this too. So you have the stress, the morale hit to your employees, the hours lost on your management. So I'm trying to think of anything else, but I'm sure there's other things. But yeah, those soft costs are very important.
Yeah, I think you're right. You talked morale. I don't think we're hiring either, but a bad hire definitely drags down your best employees and makes it more difficult for them to do their job. And it's just, that's probably your biggest cost that can leave lasting scars.
Yeah. Yeah. So we definitely want to hire slow and fire fast, even if the urgency feels heavy, if like your team's feeling it or anything, you definitely still have to put the brakes on and take your time and do the process, no matter what the urgency is. As Dave said, one bad apple basically can ruin your entire culture that you've worked so hard to maintain and build within days. It's super quick. It's like as soon as the bad attitude enters the room, everybody feels it. So the cost of going slow almost always lowers the cost that Dave was just talking about. If you move slow, it might seem like it's costing you more, but like you said, if you make the right decisions, it will not cost you that much in the long run. And we have a 90-day policy here. And I tell everybody the first day of training after they're hired, it's 90 days. You don't owe us anything. We don't owe you anything. If you're not feeling it or we're not feeling it, we're just going to shake hands, part ways, because we understand that maybe this is not exactly what they anticipated. Maybe the pace was, I feel like the last person that quit within that 90 days, the pace just wasn't what he was looking for. He was looking for very high speed, very high paced, which is fine. But just having that kind of no obligation handshake agreement, I feel like relaxes people a little bit too, especially during the training process. You're like, I don't want to learn all this pet nutrition. It's way more than I thought it could be. I'm never going to use it. I don't know what possibly could come up, but, or they could find out within the 90 days they don't have connections with the team they thought they would, and they're looking for kind of a more connected for what their interests are or anything like that. So we have a 90-day window where we don't have any questions asked. We might try and do an exit interview just to make sure there's nothing that we can fix, but it relaxes the tone after they start. So that one, we can get them out of the building as fast as possible if it happens to be a wrong hire for either their reason or our reason.
Yeah, I would say that 90 days is good for a few reasons, but it's not your fixed time. You will know if you've hired someone bad within a week or two, and you should ask them to leave in whatever appropriate way when you recognize it. You're not going to fix them. You're not necessarily going to change their core personality and their values. So Tiff will get into this, but the 90-day is really good for just taking it down a notch. Just no urgency. We can just get you in, onboard you, give you the training you need. We're going to measure your progress over 90 days. If it's not what you thought, you can leave. Of course, they don't have to stay with you 90 days, right? They can walk out the first 2 weeks. It just gives us it sets the clock. And you also, if you choose to, you can tie it to a positive benefit. We are going to have a sit down review in 90 days. We've given you the goals. We've showed you what success looks like. We've started to train you. And then you can say, and maybe you tie it to a monetary benefit. You start them some percentage lower there where you want them. Again, if we're using $15 an hour, maybe we can start them on board at 14 and say, we have an intentional review at 90 days. Assuming everything goes well, you'll be at 15. So you can actually sweeten the pot a little bit to say, this is a positive review. We're going to sit down in 90 days, no matter what happens. But remember, that's the outside limit. It's a really good probationary period to make sure that you get the coaching and the training that they need to be able to measure them from a technical perspective, that they understand the job and they're doing it well. not from an attitude perspective. And I think Tip will hit something on the attitude perspective in the hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah, and I think learning from your mistakes is huge too. So we had a young man that fit the core values, was great customer service, everything across the board, made it all the way through the interview process and probably 2 or 3 weeks into the probationary period and had like kind of a auditory sensation, like overstimulation type thing. So when the dog baths dryers were going and there was dogs barking because of the dryers and like a bunch of stuff going on, he would just have a kind of an overload a little bit and just couldn't get past that. So on top of that conversation being very uncomfortable because he was a very nice gentleman and good worker, it was just something that one, I didn't want to be that stressful place for him. I didn't want to be the place he regretted because he knew he was going to come to a very noise sensitive place. But I learned that now I make sure I put that as part of the questions in the interview as not only can you physically lift 50 pounds because we do have those size bags, but is noise something that physically bothers you? Because it does get loud sometimes in here, especially with some of the louder dogs and the air dryers and stuff like that. So if I didn't learn from my mistake and ask that, and I could get another really good applicant, then I have to have a really uncomfortable conversation about, hey, I just don't think this is the place for you. So it's painful in the mistakes, and they might not always look like apparent mistakes, but I didn't want to be that place that young man regretted coming to because it was just stressful, but he was a good employee, so he wouldn't probably quit unless it became too much for him, which I didn't want it to get to that point for him either.
Just thinking the fire fast side of hiring slow, right, is coachability and attitude are probably two of the biggest things that stand out in my mind for having to let someone go. You talked about that young man who was otherwise a really good employee, but the environment just wasn't right for him. And it was an amicable separation, sad, but everybody shake hands, walk away, no issues, no concerns. But unfortunately, a lot of the fires are attitude misfits, cultural misfits, and inability coaching. We had a young man who was in his 20s, and my goodness, he knew everything, didn't he, Tiff? He actually came to Tiff and said, "You can't teach me anything else," at 22 years old. And that is a lack of coachability, which he needed coachability. He needed to be, he wasn't doing in the things in the way that we wanted them to be done. So he needed coaching on occasion, but was not very receptive to that. Coachability is super important. And if you find that your people are not coachable, it's not the type of person probably that you can teach, educate, guide. Even if you have to correct their behavior, they're probably not going to be receptive to that. So those types of indicators could be let them go. And again, you don't have to wait till 90 days. You start to see it, you sit them down for coaching, and you decide if you continue to go on or you have to move them out. Attitude, absolutely. This is probably the number one thing that you have to look for. How do they treat the coworkers? How do they treat you? How do they speak on the phone? Obviously, how do they treat the customers face to face? How do they treat the pets? So attitude is probably the very first thing that could have the most damage if you allow it to go on too long. So that's definitely something I would fire fast over without regret, right? Sit them down, coach them. If they do not adjust behavior, send them on their way and start looking for somebody else. So coachability and attitude. And I would say it takes a little bit longer for this one, but habitual patterns are another thing that I find would be an area that you would have to fire fast over. So someone who is chronically late, and this goes with lack of coachability, but whatever we look at that is they see the world differently. They're just going to be chronically late. They might be pleasant, coachable face to face, but their behavior never changes. Maybe someone who smokes and they smoke break times a day. You don't want that. They're gone off the floor. The other employees are looking for them. No one's there to answer the phone. If that's a habit and they're not willing to change their actual behavior, even if they seem coachable, this is something that is very difficult to tolerate, lowers morale and hard customer service. So I would look for those things that you see pretty early, within first couple of days to at least the first couple of weeks. Give them an opportunity to change their behavior through coaching and clarity. But you'll find very quick, people's habits are not likely to change just for the job. If you coach them twice and you sit them down and say, here's your verbal coaching. This is what we expect and need from you. We're not going to tolerate the behavior that you're exhibiting. They get better for 2 3 days, maybe slide back in behavior, sit down again. These are our expectations. We talked about it before. It's a write up. If they get better for 2 or 3 days, maybe a week or two, they slide back to the behavior. This is what habits are. So those are the 3 things I think I would be very aware of in the early days of a hire is habits that don't sync with your expectation, coachability. If you ask them to do something and they're maybe even obstinate, but at least dismissive of your coaching, and attitude by far the most important thing to be aware of. How do they interact with their coworkers, yourself, over the phone, and obviously customers? That's a pretty obvious one. But those things are super important to look at when you want to shorten the 90-day window and just move those people out as quickly as possible because they're going to do the most damage to the morale of your best people. And that's what I've always modeled in my mind is if you want to be loyal, you want to be loyal to your absolute best customers. Get that just loyal to anybody that you hire, right? If you want to, your job as an employer is to protect your best employees. And your best ones are the ones that have been around for a while, that are doing exactly as you want. They're part of your culture and aligned with your values. So job really is to protect them and protect them with everything you've got.
Yeah. And on June 11th, we're going to jump into kind of firing, how to stick to your guns, have those uncomfortable conversations. We're definitely going to dive way deeper into that. And you talk about coachability. One way I could tell if I feel like somebody's not coachable is how uncomfortable I feel before if I say, hey, we need to have a conversation. If I feel really uncomfortable, I think I have it preconceived that I don't believe this person is coachable and this is probably not going to go well. I talk about that young man that said he could not learn anything else from us. I always had that feeling of uncomfortability of just knowing this is probably not going to be well received. Whatever educating I needed to do or whatever correcting I needed to do, it probably was not going to be well received, which is what I love about my current staff. Is I feel like if I needed to reprimand or discuss anything with them about any kind of behavior or action that happened or anything like that, they would receive it and be like, oh, my bad. I will work on that. Or it would just be well received. It stings a little bit to correct people, but because you build relationships with these people. But I definitely feel like there's a different level of uncomfortability when you just feel like you're going to tell them, hey, I need you to have a better customer service attitude about this and this scenario popped up. And they're either like, I was great customer service. What are you talking about? I don't know, something. I have great customer service skills. I don't know. But I just remember feeling that way when I was in the room with that person. And I think the final thing we want to talk about is getting back to the interview questions and what are some good interview questions. 'Cause I feel like everybody knows the standard ones. Everybody knows, are you willing to lift or willing to work these hours, availability, all those kind of generic interview questions. But we like to ask ones that are core value specific and ones for Braxton specific. So some of these most of them have come from Dave, honestly, and I've just tweaked them over the years and how I like to ask it and generate this conversation. But 4 examples of ones we really like, and we'll discuss these each. So what are you irrationally passionate about? I feel like if you could talk about any topic and it's your favorite topic for a long period of time, you have the ability to learn about something new, learn about pet nutrition, learn about how dog training, something like that, and talk for a good period of time with passion about it. So I always like to ask them, what are they irrationally passionate about? And it can be very telling if they tell you, I love reading and I love learning new things. And that'd be good signs for me, what I would think. Trying to think of one that would be a red flag right off the gate. I had a young man that said he liked to sleep. He's irrationally passionate about sleep. And I was like, well, I guess that's a lot of honesty. I don't believe he got hired though, but that definitely some of the answers I like the unique, the better, more of the conversation piece, but it kind of opens up more of a conversation of what do you like about this? What really interests you? And could you tell me something about it that I probably don't know? But again, it shows that they have the ability to educate after they've learned a topic and they can walk a customer through it. They can walk me through it, something that they're very highly already educated about. So all I have to do is train them on what I need them to do. And they should be able to at least emulate a little bit of how they speak about their passions. Anything you want to jump in on that one?
It just really in general, the way that you've formulated these questions over time it ends up looking more like a conversation than an interview, which I think is really well structured. I appreciate the way you put this together. And it's disarming in a very positive way because the interviewee begins to drop their guard and be more authentic in a conversation, especially when you start with that one. What are you irrationally passionate about? You get their mind completely out of the room. They're not in an interview anymore. They're talking about themselves. They're talking about their interests. They're talking about something they're excited about. And it's a really great way to measure their engagement overall with a topic, but it's also a really good early question because it's conversational and it's energy producing for them. And then again, I really believe that it comes across more like a conversation as you get into the other pointed questions. So I really love the way you structured this.
Yeah. Yeah. That guard down is definitely a good point because I remember one interview where he was talking about, I believe he was into programming and he dealt with a lot of businesses around programming. And then he started going a little unprofessional really quickly because the experience he had with dealing with programmers was very guy in the locker room, maybe a little kind of thing. But he started like cursing in the interview. And I was like, oh, I don't know if you'll be a good fit here. But like you said, let his guard down to kind of let some true personality come through. So if cursing doesn't fall into your core values, yeah, I would probably pass on that one. The second question. So when was the last time that you had a truly exceptional customer service experience as a consumer? We deal with a lot of really young kids. I'll say 19 to maybe 25. I'll put that really young kids category, which is terrible to categorize them as kids. But when is the last time you had a truly great customer service experience as a consumer? Because I feel like they're just getting into buying things. They're just getting into going out to restaurants and being more situationally aware. So they might recognize what good customer service is. And if they can recognize it, I feel like you can teach somebody it. If they say they've never had a good customer service experience in their life, it's did you or did you just not recognize it because you really don't know what it looks like kind of thing. And I feel like if you can't recognize it, you can't emulate it. You don't have to have the skills coming in. You just need to have the precursor to recognize it and understand how it makes you feel so that you can also provide that to another person. So that's a question that I find very telling. And it definitely ranges depending on what stage of life they're in. Some of that retirees have really good stories and they usually the customer service skills are a lot more refined at that time frame. But I like some of the concepts that people come up with, whether it's at a restaurant or a retail store or something, because it can be hard because a lot of companies are getting away from a high end customer service experience. So sometimes they find themselves reaching, but if another person at a business can make you feel special, you just have to be able to recognize that.
It also tells about their orientation if they would have a tendency to go negative. Oh, I can really tell you about some crappy experiences. One, okay, it's good to know what bad customer service looks like, but it could also mean that they have a little bit of a negative orientation where most of their experiences appear to be negative in their mind. So this is another good question, not just to understand if they are familiar with and recognize good customer service and how it makes them feel so that they can be taught our way to make our customers feel really good, but also if they're oriented towards recognizing positive experiences overall. Are they optimistic or are they pessimistic? And optimism and being positive tends to be a better employee. They're open to recognizing experiences that are good because you know what? Hey, in face-to-face retail, most of our customer experiences are really good, neutral for the most part, many very good, only a few negative. But if they're oriented towards negativity, they're going to feel like their whole day went bad if they had one bad experience out of 50 customer interactions. So orientation is just as important that this tends to discover as much as recognition of what it means.
Yeah, definitely. So another question we ask, and this is towards the integrity, towards the making ease for others kind of core value that we have. So what's the last big challenge you faced at either work or school, and how did you work through it? This is a more standard interview question. Definitely. I feel like people get asked this one frequently or they structure it differently. But I think it's very important because it can show you where they're at in life. Like, what have they seen as a challenge? You'd be like, yes, I had a disagreement with a teacher over my grade. And how did you work through that? Did you yell at the teacher or did you have your parents handle it? Which is one answer I got for that. And I was like, oh gosh, that's not the right answer. And I hope I never become that parent where my son is asking me to handle a choreo through a teacher for him. But those kinds of answers come out if they're younger, and if they're older, they've had like a little bit heavier experiences. They're usually a little bit more detailed in how they handled it, and it can just be an elusive question. Oh, it's a dog. Yeah, I don't know if you can hear that on here, but
Yeah, and I think, like you said, this might be a little bit of a phone it in type question, something that's fairly common. And your job then is really just to understand if it's a rehearsed answer or if it's something that they're being sincere about and that's a truthful experience. And if it seems rehearsed, you can just keep digging in. Is what was that like when you did that? What did that feel like? Was the resolution satisfactory? So that you can go beyond the surface question and try to continue the conversation by asking, not probing, but just continuing. Oh, and what else happened with that? How do you think the other person felt when it was solved? How did you feel when it was solved? So making sure that it's not just a canned rehearsed answer that they practiced and they're going to recite to whoever they're applying for, but it is still a very good question. And speaks really to them how they work through problems. And that's very useful to understand.
yeah, I think two things I'm really looking for is ownership. If their story entails that they messed up something, taking ownership of that, and basically how they communicated under pressure type things. So I feel like those are the two biggest ones that we really care about is when you mess up, are you communicating that you messed up? Are you communicating the customer that we're going to get you the order you needed, even though we placed the wrong order type thing? So those are kind of answers that I'm looking for when you ask those follow-up questions. Do they take ownership of their response, of their whatever?
A follow-up question to your point is communicating under pressure is if they don't answer in a way that's satisfactory. One of the questions I ask is looking back, do you think there's a way that could have solved it better? And this goes to, okay, ownership, right? Something happened in the moment and it was solved, but we should be introspective and maybe come up with a better way. And maybe not, they don't have to, but we can tell, again, revisiting ownership and revisiting communication, if they go, oh, yeah, that was 3 years ago. And I think I have a better way to solve that now that would have worked faster or better, but it's just one of these conversation continuing type questions. Oh, that's interesting the way that you solved that. Knowing what you know now, do you think you would have solved it the same way or a different way? Was there a way that you could solve it that might have produced a better result? So those types of questions are what I was talking about earlier, where you can just probe and dig in and get them to go a little bit further, especially if you feel like it was a somewhat canned, prepared answer.
Yeah. And the last one that I really like to ask is again more of a standard interview question, but important to me to see their coachability is what skills are you hoping to build or sharpen in your next role? To me, this kind of tells us if they're looking to build skills that maybe we can't help them provide, or maybe they're looking for skills that we could that might not be in the typical role that opens up the opportunity for growth and potentially added value to our store if they're looking to learn, I don't know, what kind of back end skills. Like right now, AI is everything. And we're doing a lot of things within our business with AI. So if I interviewed somebody and they said, I'm really looking to build skills in AI, what if they can work retail and they have that concept in their head? They might be able to think of things that we didn't think of because we're not in the everyday retail space, and that as potential projects to make our retail staff's lives easier, whatever the case may be, or that we have projects we want to push through on the back end that we don't have bandwidth with, and can ask that person to work on to help build the skills and work on what they want so that there's a mutual benefit because not everybody wants to learn pet nutrition and pet specific industry skills. But if you want to hone your customer service skills, you want to hone your communication skills, those soft skills, I want to know about it. And I want to know that somebody's aware that they might need to work on themselves. Because if you get a 22-year-old in here that doesn't believe they need to work on skills, I have a very hard lesson for them to learn really quickly. But I'm not willing to teach that person, to be honest. I don't want to pay that tax, essentially. I'd rather business down the road that doesn't want to do that due diligence have to teach them that type thing.
Yeah, one of the reasons I like this is it asks them if they're forward focused a little bit. And they just here because they need a job, they want a paycheck, they have to, whatever it is, it's just another day. And 3 years later, it's just another day. But if they are a little bit forward oriented, and they've thought about it and they do want to develop skills. Maybe they have goals, maybe they have aspirations. And to Tiff's point, we might not be hiring specifically for their interests, but there could be some alignment between what we do here and what their interests are. That's good. Or even just knowing, if we can't help them, that they actually have aspirations, that they actually want to be better tomorrow than they are today. Even if it's not within our four walls, we know we have a person who is probably going to be interested in learning, be interested in growing, be interested in doing better for themselves over time. So this is a good personality trait. One, if there's alignment, it's a win-win. Even if there's not alignment, you have a personality that may not be with you forever, but while they're with you, they're probably going to be a good employee.
Yeah. And these are questions that are not necessarily exclusive, and you can add to them and definitely ask more than just 4 questions in the interview. But these are like 4 we really like here. I feel like they're very telling and outside the box a little bit. And like you said, make it more of a conversation and less of a structured interview, because they're going to be having conversations with your customers on a daily basis. So they need to be able to do it in a very low stakes setting with just you, where they can articulate like their passions and everything. So some red flags in an interview. I want to touch on these real quick because I have a feeling that a lot of people know about the very obvious ones. Speaking negatively about any kind of past employment without any self-reflection would be a huge red flag. Not giving specific examples when asked about any of these things. If they can't come up with a good answer to the irrationally passionate, I'd be like, what do you do? Sit in your room all day? What are we doing? Kind of thing. I feel like that question alone should at least have a pretty good answer. The rest of them being more standard interview questions, they might not have that polishedness, but I feel like anybody should be able to answer that question if you engage in the world in any way. Struggling to identify any customer service experience if you ask that question, showing no curiosity in our store. If the first, I always follow up every interview with kind of, do you have any questions for me? And if they don't, I'm like, are you sure? Because I didn't talk about the role at all or anything. And hopefully your job description does a good job of at least articulating a little bit of that. But I feel like if you don't have any questions about the role, or if your question is, what's the rate, the pay rate, which seems to be on the younger generation, they ask that first. It just doesn't seem like they're interested in the job and not so much Braxton's or what value they could provide at Braxton's. Do you hold, I know you don't do much interviews anymore, but I know like the way that they look, not necessarily like the way they present themselves. Do you still hold weight on some of those things?
You mean like physically how they show up, how they're dressed? I think self-respect, right? So you can see a little bit about how they choose to present themselves to the world comes through in the way that they stand and the way that they dress. We are, oh, sorry, we're wearing t-shirts. We're not wearing button-down shirts and khakis every day. We're not wearing ties, and we're pretty low threshold. But I would expect you to be clean and neat, cared for, obviously showered. We want you to come in and present yourself better than you would expect to work here, right? You know, we wear t-shirts and we're okay wearing shorts or jeans, and that's okay. But at least be neat and clean and showered, and also posture. And again, physical orientation is super important. Are you slouchy in your chair? Are you like lazy in your movement? Yes, I think these are things that should be considered as red flags, because if you're coming in sweatpants or inappropriate clothing, that means in it, you would expect that you're presenting your best self. And if your best self can't get out of sweatpants, then you probably don't want this job. That's the way I would look at it. But I would say, and physical carry, how do you carry your body? Do you look like you're interested in being here? Are you engaged again? Or are you slouching and just completely disinterested? Those are super indicators and definitely red flags.
The one thing that you has pointed to me is like they have to be somewhat of a brand aesthetic too. I think the example, maybe I'll let you just tell the story of the Hot Topic employee versus the Braxton employee, because I do like that story.
Yes. So mostly for existing employees, because if you're coming in for an interview, again, there's an expectation that you are at least neat and clean and everything. And we had an employee in the past who multiple violations of our dress code. So short shorts, lots of exposed tattoos, which were not, started to things shift over time, right? Culture shift over time. And facial piercings, including brow and nose, and she might have had lip or tongue. I can't remember. And her, my position is that whether or not I care about it is irrelevant. It's what the majority of our customers, especially our best customers, they are expecting an experience when they come into Braxton's. And I want a customer to come in the door and see even a young person as a professional who can answer their questions. Her comment was, why does it matter? They shouldn't judge on the way that I look. And okay, that's fair. It's just not realistic. And the manager at the time who had to sit down with her simply said, you shop at Hot Topic, right? What would you think if you went into Hot Topic and there was a 40-year-old guy in a sport coat and khakis asking to help you? And she said, that's ridiculous. And he said, you're right. It is. So it's just not a cultural fit. You have to look at who your consumer is, who your best customers are, and what are their expectations of your staff. And we want to make sure that we are adhering to that. And what image do we want to present? That's really how important it is. But, and you're right, Tiff. I think that the Hot Topic girl was, it was really a conversation between her and former manager. And I've stuck with that story because I think it was so telling and really reveals a lot about the old, like, why should it matter? Don't judge me. Okay, sure.
Yeah. But I think it's important in the interview process if somebody does present themselves in a similar or at least off brand to yours, and especially if you have it written out in your guidelines of how you're supposed to properly dress, make sure that you address that in the interview. We have a size requirement on nose studs, and we've had people come in with much bigger outside of that. I say, hey, I really like that. I'm sorry, our rule book states it has to be within this size or something shape or the invisible kind, something like that. Would you be willing, if worked here, to remove that? Because you do not want to have it hire them for a good personality fit and then get them and be like, I don't want to take this out. Like, then you just like, now we have to start from scratch kind of thing. So it's definitely something you want to address. And I always make sure I do because it's way more uncomfortable to get them through the door, get them trained a little bit. And you're like, did I tell you I'd take that out? I'm sorry. Like, that's, yeah, kind of thing. So it's definitely more uncomfortable to address it later than just do it in the interview because you don't have a relationship with that person yet. So it's just, hey, I know it's awkward. I really don't have a problem with it, but our company guidelines are this and this. Would you be willing to adhere to that? So that you don't have your however long that Hot Topic girl worked here, and then you have to have those comfortable conversations over and over again. I feel like if you feel a red flag in an interview, you should definitely trust your gut. I know we talk about don't operate your business on gut feeling, especially when it comes to inventory and data, when you have data to rely on. But I feel like it's very hard to analyze people's behavior on a metric to which you would collect data and just say you do not pass this metric. But I feel gut feeling definitely plays a role of they answered that question, but there's something about the way they answered it that just doesn't seem right. On paper, if you wrote it down, you'd say, yes, checks these boxes, but the way that they told the story or anything like that, anything gut feeling wise, I don't feel like I've ever regretted just saying, hey, they said all the right things, but something about it just didn't feel right kind of thing.
Yeah, that was something that happened with the previous manager too. We were in the position of being desperate. We were shorthanded. We were interviewing as many people as we could. And he came to me one day. He said, I interviewed a handful of people. I think this one might be okay. Now I'm a little on the fence. And my comment to him was, there is no fence. You can't be on the fence. If you're on the fence, that's equivalent to a no. And this speaks exactly to what Tiff is saying, is that he didn't understand why. He could not articulate why he was unsure about this person. But I basically was saying to him exactly what Tiff said, is trust your gut. You either have to be really pleased with the interview and happy to be hiring that person. But if you're on the fence simply because you need a warm body, it's probably not the right person. You probably recognize something in the interview, in the interaction that was just not satisfactory. And it's way easier to say no at the interview level than it is 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks later when whatever that thing was starts to come out in their day-to-day behaviors. Then it's a sit down, then it's a conversation, then it's a coaching. So truth is, you might say no to someone who would have been a perfect fit, but I still believe it's better to focus on just attracting the best people, hiring the best people, and you're going to end up with way fewer problems over the long run.
Not that too many things at Braxton's keep me up at night, but if I ever do have that gut feeling with an interview and I'm like, I just don't think so, and I just let it bother me for the one night. Whereas if you do bring them in and you're like, oh, this person's causing friction with my best employees, and then it becomes sleepless nights from there on out. So it's just save yourself one night of sleepless thing when you're going to tell this person no, as opposed to weeks, maybe months with that kind of problem. So to put everything together, we talked about establishing your core values so that you know who you are as a company, know what kind of people you want in your company, and how to target them, finding out who you want to target and setting up those employee avatars the same way you have set up customer avatars. You know, where you want to post based off of who you're trying to target, what kind of copy you want to build in that post so that it actually lands with the person you're targeting. The interview process, some of the red flags, some of the good questions to ask, how to kind of get outside of standard interview concept and understand that we're not hiring out of desperation. You have a timeline and you're sticking to it, basically. And laying out a 90-day window of this doesn't have to, like 90 days, we can shake hands, part ways, no questions asked. The right hire makes your best employees better, and the wrong hire makes them leave. And that's the last thing we want is our best people leaving out the door because we thought we needed a warm body. So that is what is actually at stake every time you hire somebody. Is there anything else we want to add, Dave?
Just from maybe a legal standpoint, we're in Pennsylvania. We're a right to hire state, which means very flexible. You don't have to have a reason. You don't have to have a path to elimination and firing, but know your rules and guidelines. This is another reason in Pennsylvania, it's not that difficult to fire someone, but there's always cautions about kickback, that maybe it is the child of a customer and things can go bad from a perception problem. So it is not only easier for your own emotional state to say no in the interview level versus letting someone through the gate that is probably not going to turn out well, but potentially legally, depending on the state that you're in, it can be more difficult to fire somebody, but also emotionally on the long term, like Tiff talked about, and culturally with his team and staff. So I'm just kind of going back to finishing up what Tiff said is it's more important to trust your gut on that level because there's a lot of damage that can go on with hiring the wrong person. And for people in more strict states for employee law, you have to be concerned about that as well.
Yeah. So now that we have the right people in the building, next week we're going to talk about how to train them and basically creating SOPs and a training program that helps you cut cost with training people, helps you get them trained efficiently and thoroughly so that they are ready to work as soon as possible. And that's going to be the topic of next week. And until then, we'll see you then.
All right.